Okay, here I am again having an awesome conversation with Mr. David Metter, founder of AutoHook, currently powered by Urban Science. David and I go back a long way. In fact, it was the Mile 1 days, and I had heard his name even before that when he was at Autobase. I think we have both kicked cans around this industry for a super long time. Today, it's awesome. David decided to join us from his garage band location. I am again sequestered to my upstairs, almost attic area where my Philadelphia Eagles chairs are in the back and my working whiteboard. And thought we would have another fun conversation about what's going on, bring some different perspective in, some ideas, and what's going on. So with that, Dave, you want to give a little background and then we can kind of just jam out? So
Sure. I think you did a great job. It was, I even forgot about my time at Autobase back in the day.
I did not.
When we were infants.
Yes.
It was before,
Yes,
gray beard.
before all the gray came in, man. So
That's right.
no, that's good. So, well, let's jump in. I mean, obviously, you're well regarded in the industry. I think that, you have your hands in a lot of stuff. You've done a lot of stuff. So I think your perspective's pretty interesting. I know we've been talking a little bit before we kind of hit record, but, let's kind of jump right in. I mean, what do you see going on right now from the vendor side in the marketplace? So we'll start there.
Yeah, I see a lot of reactionary movement, which is sort of common in our industry, and I think that I have an interesting perspective because I came into the business in '89. We were in a deep recession. I started selling cars in that, and honestly didn't know any better. And then we mentioned Autobase. I joined Autobase. We were less than 10 employees, startup, and just kind of growing the business. 9/11 hit, right? And the impact of that in the auto industry was great. And then I was at Mile 1. I had been at Mile 1 for about 3.5 years, and we didn't know what we were preparing for. But in '08, we hit the Great Recession, and so I have this interesting perspective, I guess, from being a salesperson in a dealership to being in the vendor side, and then being in a large privately owned dealer group, had 75 stores, into now, and I am fascinated by the consistency of this reactionary movement by a good portion of our industry, mostly by dealers, but we're seeing it in the vendor space as well, and my concern is that you'll see the same exact thing happen. You're going to see some retraction. You're going to see people kind of put themselves out of business in some ways. But the inspiring part of it is you always, in all three of those, you see some really cool innovation, and you see that small percentage of dealers and groups that come out of this, man, just flying high.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, innovation, I always feel during these times, innovation is the driver, right? Change of behavior is causing people to do different things. I mean, if we go back to '08, Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, all of them were founded. Like
Yep.
all of those now monster tech companies came out of that. Now, this is obviously a little different because I think we'll be heading into a recession because of this a little bit more. But, I think consolidations in our industry, I think we'll see some of those. I don't know. I mean, what else what are you seeing out there? Have you seen some innovation starting to happen from the dealer side with clients? Or?
I think what I'm seeing is anything that happens, you see amplified from what's in their core. And what I mean by that is, if they were reactionary, then that gets amplified at this point, in this period of time. But like I see groups doing really well. We were talking about Todd Caputo, and something that he did a year ago. There's no way that Todd had an idea that this type of scenario would play out, but he did things against the grain. People thought he was crazy, and it's paid off for him. There's I was talking to the guys at Walser up in Minneapolis, and they didn't sell more cars in March than they did in the previous year in the same month, but they grew market share because of things that they did a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, that started to really take shape, that allowed them, when everyone else kind of retracted, they were able to expand.
So that gives a good point. So right now is probably a really good time to be planting the seeds for the harvest in the coming months, years to be. And I talked to Todd yesterday, and it was very interesting that, yeah, he didn't see it coming. He just saw the entire industry's need to shift, in his opinion, that, going to single price, one point of contact, as well as trying to push more people through an online experience than come sit in my showroom for 4 hours, right? So
right.
that was his run to that. So I think it brings up also interesting, what do you think about obviously all the third-party lead providers right now? I think that was the first thing every dealer shut off. Wonder how that space will change or evolve. So.
Well, I mean, I think you've seen a tendency of dealers, backing out of those types of programs on their own. There are OEM-sponsored third-party lead programs, and different OEMs feel differently about these programs. Some love them, some hate them. But I think that there is going to be, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that there is going to be even more retraction in that space. And I think I'll tell you, I'm worried about 3 different spaces. I'm worried about the third-party leads. I'm worried about the third-party sites and how they're reacting in this time, and and how consumers are engaging, and being able to, really pull opportunities and be able to attribute them as real opportunities, on the third-party sites. And then, Adtech. I think,
Yeah,
I think
there's a space that's on a
yeah.
collision course.
Yeah. And so, and I'll tell you why I think that. I think that there's some, you wonder how Google, Facebook, Amazon are gonna deal with that. Now, you got to remember, they have like all the traffic. One of the things that nobody's really talked about is Amazon lately.
Right.
But what if they choose at this point in time to get into the automotive space, because of all of the traffic that they have, because of all the behavioral information that they have, they could potentially wipe out some of the third-party lead, third-party listings sites because of what they have, and especially now what they have. I mean, who's not shopping on Amazon?
Yeah, it brings up a good point. I always felt like, and me, I'm always reading, and it's fascinating that the real data is held by the Googles, Facebooks, Amazon, Apple, right? They control data, and everything else is like getting a breadcrumb of what they have. So from Adtech and Google removing, to me, the cooking was just, hey, we're going to eliminate all these small ad tech companies like this to just provide and feed our larger companies more. And I feel that will cascade up to a point where they're like, yeah, we're just keeping this business for ourselves. So them having all the data, the interesting thing where I look at it, the third parties, the lead providers, I don't think they're taking it far enough. I don't think dealers want more leads anymore. I think they want people that are ready. They want it served up to them. They want appointments. They want soft pulls. Who is this person? I want a more complete look at them. I just don't want another name and email address sent to my store. That good luck trying to get a hold of those people. So,
well, it's funny. It was 13 years ago, I was speaking at JD Power. And I said something, I was up on stage, and I said, I would buy $50 leads, but they didn't hear anything else that I said. What I said around that was, was that if these opportunities are vetted, and at the time we were building out lead scoring within our dealer group with data providers. And so we knew the highest likely to buy, and we had tested this out, and it really proved out well. And that's, I said, look, we know that credit app type leads have the highest closing ratio because they've gone through steps and they're at that point of, I want approval, or I want to see if I can buy. And along with lead scoring and all these other things, that's when I said, okay, I'll buy a $50 lead because I know the math. Like the simple math is, if I can get a lead for $50 and I know that they have a showroom visit rate of, let's say, 40%, when my average is 17% show rate, and if I know that if 40% of them come in and half of them are going to buy, whatever that math is, right? I've got a cost per sale that's about $100 cost per sale, or 120, or whatever that was. And that was the math that we used back in the day to acquire opportunities to drive traffic. I mean, actually, that was really the birth of AutoHook. But we did that, and all people heard was, I'll buy a $50 lead. So, I got attacked when I came off the stage.
For sure. Every vendor's like, hey, David, I have the best leads for you. Please, let's sign up right now.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. That's an interesting thing. I think we need to, the industry has to move a little bit in that regard, and just stop trying to pump out leads and pump out to me, I think it's like a gating factor. Like you need to have some gates put up to say, okay, these people showed interest. They're not really a whole lead yet. Let's run them through a couple more scenarios using machine learning or some type of interaction experience that gets them to a point where they're like, this guy's going to buy within the next, 7 to 14 days. Our modeling shows that. Now let's give it to the dealer, right? And let the dealer do his job in creating the best offer and package for that particular customer. So the onus should fall more onto the provider, because I think, and again, my opinion, the providers in the third-party space, and look, they've been around the industry for a long time. They're great. They've added value over time, but I feel they've created less and less requirements of information to pass a lead on to the dealer, and burden the dealer then to figure out that other missing pieces of information to get a hold and convert that shopper. And I think it all goes back to something I know you were really passionate about, which was getting away from the antiquated XML ADF feed from 1995, which is still prevalent in our industry as a way to transfer data, instead of moving to star or moving to just like a JSON or a web call or API, which is shocking that we still live in an archaic piece of how we limit the amount of data that we can transfer. And I know you were big about star. Tell me what your thoughts are there. So.
That I feel like this is a leading question, but this is good, because I think that what people saw was that we weren't able to get any traction, and it wasn't because vendors weren't interested in changing the export, into CRM, and what it was really about. Like we did this project for well over a year, all volunteers, right? Everybody volunteered their time. There wasn't $1 payment. I know that for sure. But a lot of time, money, and effort to get this off the ground. And we couldn't, because at the end of the day, the CRM companies, and I don't want to bucket all of them, but a vast majority of them, I felt like we were trying to get a bill through Congress. And it was interesting, because what would happen is you would get blocked, right? You'd get blocked, and then they'd want to change things, and then you're like, wait a minute, this bill has nothing to do with this, but why do you want to put this in here? And we just can never get any traction. And then the next one would see it and they go, well, we don't want that. We can't do that. Well, what's in it for us? And a lot of that was prevalent. It was really, really frustrating to me, because I thought we were doing what was best for the industry, not being selfish and, you know, and narrow-minded. And I don't mean to be so direct, but it was frustrating because dealers deserve better.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like we're sending them, it's like going to build a house. And you have all these awesome tools that are around you, right? That would make the job a lot easier. And yet you decide to send them up on the roof with a broken hammer and a bunch of bent nails. And that's basically what you're doing to them. And that's the way I kind of view ADF XML.
So do I. You know, I love data, and I've always said that, you know, the more data you have, the better conversation you're going to have, more potential contact methods you could, whether you want to reach out on social, alternate email, home address, whatever, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I just feel like we're just missing a boat there. And maybe this is one of those times where innovation can be sparked, you know, since dealers are, I mean, it's almost like the industry is resetting itself as America resets itself, right? And, you know, it'll be interesting. What does the next, do you think, 6, 12, 18 months look like in your mind?
You know, I'll answer that question, but I'll answer it maybe differently. You mentioned earlier in the recession in 08, there were certain things that came out of that, right? Airbnb, you had Uber, you had Lyft. I believe things that will stick out of this time will be a lot of delivery service. Now, obviously, everybody is taking advantage of Instacart and Whole Foods with Amazon Prime and all of these. In fact, you can't even get times. Like, you can't, like, I looked this morning to get my normal delivery and it's like next Wednesday, next Tuesday, right? Wow. And so what does that tell you? There's demand.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think about dealerships that have been really proactive in service concierge services, like Paragon Honda up in New York. And so, you know, he was in this a year and a half ago, and he's got a great case study around what he's been able to do to penetrate that marketplace. And when his market reopens, he's already in place for that. I think that you're going to see, you've got, you know, even Lincoln, I just thought about their commercial. They're doing pickup and delivery. Yeah. And they were already doing that before this happened. So what I guess where I'm going with this, I believe that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for pickup delivery, not just in service, but also in that transition of like, come to you, test drive the vehicle, come to you, let us do a quick evaluation of your trade, you know, that kind of stuff. What are the things that are really cumbersome in the car buying process? It's trade and finance, right?
Yeah.
And so, and servicing the vehicle. So if we can eliminate maybe 2 of those in having these, you know, alternative transporting, pickup, delivery, evaluation, I think that's gonna be things that are gonna stick within our industry. And then hopefully the finance situation will kind of play itself out as well. Because then the car buying process is actually pretty good.
Yeah, so all around like logistics. So logistics management. That'll be interesting. See, that's thinking about things. That's where Amazon could just dominate. They own logistics, man. Like their logistics modeling is far better than anybody for moving stuff around. And that's a very interesting thing. I wonder if they're even thinking about that. So,
well, I mean, we know that they have the traffic. We know that they have behavioral information. Every time that I walk through my house and I'm talking to my kids or my wife and my Alexa with the little green spinny light, right?
Yeah.
You know that they're listening, and I'm okay with that. And you know that they have the trucks. They've ordered hundreds of thousands of new fleet vehicles. They have space pretty much everywhere in almost every state.
Yeah.
That's, you know.
That's an interesting thing to come out of this, you know? So, yeah, I mean, there are going to be a lot of opportunities. I mean, my last company was born in end of 07, 08, in the birth of all this stuff. So I definitely know that in times of distress, that's true opportunity will reveal itself. And I think all the entrepreneurs, other vendors listening, dealers, that's how you have to look at this opportunity. Is this is actually a great opportunity. It quiets the market. And to me, it's like settling the sand in the canals in Venice, right? The water's super clear now. You get to see where you couldn't see before. And then realign yourself to come back out very aggressively in this business, and not to stop. I think, there was a study that I don't know if I shared with you, Harvard did, that they interviewed and they did analysis of all these corporations after the recession. And the ones that really peeled back, like cut their whole staff, did that, had a very hard run out of the gate to succeed. The ones that like furloughed or half paid their people, but kept the main business units intact, came out much faster and had much higher levels of profitability in the end. So I thought that was an interesting study because, I've heard, I'm watching my feed, seeing everybody is like fired. And I'm like, is this the right move for these companies? Or should they just say, look, we're going to keep you. I can't pay you full. I'm going to pay you half. I'm going to pay you 25%. Just stay with us and, contribute. We'll reduce your hours. Let's do a million other things besides cut bait completely. What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you, I have a couple of examples. I'll leave out names.
Okay.
But talked to a company. It was 2 days. So we're talking mid-March into this. There's almost no chance that they ran enough of an analysis to know exactly where they sat, unless they were deeply in trouble before, which I don't believe. And they cut. I mean, they immediately cut. And which I think hurts the culture, certainly, of the people who are, now you've created fear with the people who were still there, right?
Yeah.
They were 2 days in. So then there is that uneasiness of going, well, have they really done a full analysis of like where they really are and how they should be acting in this? I think it was extremely reactionary, and it really set like a low bar. So to your point. But then I talked to a dealer group a couple days later, privately held dealer group, and large, very large, top five-ish, large. And it was so cool and interesting to hear their perspective. Their perspective was, look, we're watching our competitors. They're actually firing a lot of good people. This is our time. We're going to go and get those good people. Like, we already have a great core group of people who are extremely loyal to the person who runs that organization, right? And he's promised to take care of them, which he always does. But more importantly, he goes, this is the opportunity for us to go and, back to fill in those gaps where we might have them within our organization. And that's the difference. And that's when that organization, you'll probably see them come out of this, at a trajectory that's positive.
It's all mindset. I read that book, Carol Schlecki, about mindset. And she's like, you have an open mind, right? Or a fixed mindset. If you have a fixed mindset, you're in trouble. That open mindset is, okay, I don't care what's going on. How do we leverage this? This is our opportunity. It's not like, oh, woe is me, we have to cut. No, let's leverage this. And I think some of these dealer groups, the smart ones will be aggressive, they have to preserve cash. We all understand that. But at the same token, the number one most valuable thing in any organization is your people. So how you treat your people during this instance is going to impact you far past whatever happens on COVID-19, I think. So.
Well, I shared with you, I think one of the marking moments in my career was, in 2008 when we were at Mile One, and we were run by such good people, family run, privately held business. And I don't remember, I could be wrong, but I don't remember furloughing employees. I don't remember cutting staff. I don't remember any of that. What I remember, actually, I dug this, out of my attic yesterday because I used it. But this was our defining moment. Like we were flat from '06 to '07 on market share, and then you can see what happened in '08 and '09. Like it was our defining moment. At the same time, we were decreasing what we were spending in advertising. It wasn't. We didn't go cut everything. We
Right.
had already transitioned to digital, right? And everyone else then cut, which meant that we had more of the share of audience. And then we did so well with that share of audience transitioning in because we had good people still within our organization, still manning the ship. We were able, to really pull that out. And so, as I use the example of the other dealer group, I think you're going to see the same exact thing. I shared with you, what I heard from Walser. I think you'll see the same exact. I think you'll see these really cool stories come out, within our industry over the next 2, 3, 4 months. They'll just come out of this, like a rocket ship.
I agree. So, all right. So final thoughts. Let's see. The interesting, fun questions. So I'll leave the interesting one to me. Manufacturers, are they doing the right thing by creating these insane incentives to drive whatever sales they can get now? Will that be good? Do you think that hurts? What's going to happen in leasing because of this? I mean, as a final general wrap up here today, what do you think the manufacturers are doing, or what should they be doing? So,
well, I can tell you that we've been monitoring this. And so the OEMs that are offering incentives are getting the traffic. So clearly the consumers are engaged in it, and they're searching very specific terms around these types of incentives. Whether they're good or not, in the long term, I think that there's some questions, especially when you get in length of term. But 0%, I think, is a good thing, right? And I think that some of the other things that manufacturers are doing to protect consumers or to engage consumers, I think is a great thing, because where we have seen a decrease in sales, somewhere in the neighborhood of mid to high 30% decrease in March, what we didn't see is traffic decrease. We've actually seen impression counts go up, right? And you've heard a lot of people talk about this. We actually saw leads kind of level off. They decreased that third week of March, but they've come back up. And so whatever incentives are happening, and the manufacturers that have those incentives are getting the share of the traffic, I guess you can't say that that's a bad thing. So no. I think we need the manufacturers to do these types of things, but more importantly, we need the dealers to understand what the manufacturers are doing. Don't go hide in the hole and go and engage in those same kind of conversations, grab your share of the traffic, and then ultimately transition them into leads and opportunities for you.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. My phone is blown up from friends like, oh my God, I want to take advantage of GM's 0%. Like, who do I call? What do I do? So I feel like the people who aren't afraid of what's going on in the world are as business as usual. Hey, I need to buy a car. And then you have some people, look, their leases are terming right now, this month, next month. Yep. They need a car. That has to happen. So there's always going to be demand inside here. Even if it's a little less right now, there is a subset, people will hold off, I think. But no, that brings up a good point. I'm curious, like how these things, it's one thing we take an action today. Sometimes we don't see the impact for 3 months, 6 years, 2 years. And in this particular case, we couldn't see the impact for many years. It could be 5 to 7 years when people are just, buried in trades. So,
yep.
So that'll be interesting. So, well, cool. Hey, I really appreciate you taking the time today. It's always awesome to talk with you and have these kind of fun chats with a little reminiscing of our old times as we've grown gray in our old age. So
yep.
But it's good. So appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time today. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And hold on.